Hello, in this example we'll do some examples of simplifying numerical expressions with negative exponents. So one thing before we do any of these examples, just remember that if you had a number, or let's say a to the negative n, that's the same thing as 1 over a to the n. So all that the negative exponent does is if it's in the numerator, it would move it down to the denominator, or if you had it in the denominator, that would move it up to the numerator, because this would be the same thing as 1 over a to the n, and dividing by the 1 over a to the n would be the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal, which would give you just a to the n. So this a to the negative 1, that would be the same thing as 1 over a to the first, which would just be 1/8. The a to the negative 2, that would be 1 over 8 squared, which would be 1 over 64. Now if you had the negative exponent on the parentheses, remember that means everything will be moved down. So this would, the negative 3, that quantity raised to the negative 1 would be 1 over, let's say, the negative 3 to the first, which would just be 1 over negative 3, which also is the same thing as negative 1 over 3 or negative 1/3. You could think of it as all three of those are the same thing. Now one thing, keep in mind that if you did have the quantity negative 3 to the negative 4, that would be 1 over the negative 3 to the fourth, and everything inside the parentheses is being raised to that 4, so if you raise a negative to an even power, that's going to make it positive, so that'll be the same thing as 1 over 3 to the fourth, which would be 1 over 81. Now, just to note, that's different than if you had negative 3 to the negative 4 written this way without the parentheses, because when it's written this way, the negative 4 is only on the 3, not on the negative. So this would be negative 1 over 3 to the fourth, which would be negative 1 over 81. So keep in mind, if it's on the parentheses, then everything is being raised to that exponent. If there is no parentheses, it's just whatever is directly on top of is being raised to that exponent. Now, if you have a fraction raised to the negative exponent, if you had, let's say, a over b raised to the negative n, that's the same thing as the reciprocal b over a raised to the n. Because when you distribute that exponent, it would move the 1 in the numerator down to the denominator and the 1 in the denominator up to the numerator. So this would be the same thing as b to the n over a to the n. So for this one, this would be the same thing as 3/2 to the negative 2, or sorry, to the positive 2, because you've now raised, you got rid of that negative exponent, which would be the same thing as 3 squared over 2 squared, which would be the same thing as 9 over 4.